Today, we are going to be taking a look back at the offseason with a returning guest, JJ.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, I am joined by James Johnson of the Win Column, who you've been coming on the show for a very long time now. How are you doing?
It's always good to be back and to chat with you, Jess. Doing well.
Probably better than the Flames. So
got him.
Yeah, we're going to be evaluating the off season, looking at some projections and what is Conroy's vision on today's episode. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. We're well into the preseason now. The regular season starts in like 10 days. What have you had enough time to digest the off season and what became of it?
Yeah, to be honest, it was nice to have an off season where there wasn't a lot of Calgary news. Obviously, last summer it was like, this guy doesn't want to be here, this guy doesn't want to be here, blah, 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 blah. So it was nice. You got Markstrom dealt, Mangiapane dealt. I'm sure we'll get into that. And then a couple of free agent signings, and then pretty much nothing. And that was nice to just kind of digest and take time away from it. So, But now being back with preseason, and the Flames have gotten off to a good start, and people are kind of overhyping again as usual, and we'll see what happens when the regular season hits. But yeah, it's nice to be back in the swing of things for sure.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, there wasn't a ton of movement, and that's fantastic considering how much has changed within the last 18 months. This team, it's an entirely new roster almost when you look at it. Like, yeah, obviously you still have like the veterans in your core, but like there are some pieces in here that really weren't expected to be there. Like, obviously Zary and Pospisil this past season weren't necessarily projected to be NHL regulars, but then you also have Sharon Govich, who the expectations were very low for him coming from New Jersey after a down year. What are your thoughts on obviously his career year and this extension he just signed?
Yeah, and I'll preface by saying I'm not the biggest fan of Sharon Govich, and in the Flames market, I know like that's a very like non-popular opinion to have. A lot of people like him, and that's great. I just kind of see a one-trick pony, and it worked last year, but if people start to kind of figure out his game now that he's, I don't want to say like a key member of the team, but now he kind of had his coming out season and more people know his name. If other teams kind of start to scout him, and I think he'll maybe regress a bit, and that's not even looking at the numbers and shooting percentage and all of that, which tell you that was a career year. And the Flames have a lot of wingers, and that was kind of one thing I was surprised about them this offseason, that they moved out Mangiapane and brought in Anthony Mantha, and I kind of see that as kind of a toss-up, like kind of a similar guy going out and a similar guy going in. So a guy like Sharon Govich kind of made sense to me as somebody that you could have sold high on after a career season. But again, he's 26, so he kind of fits in the range of somebody you want to keep around,
Mhm.
I guess. But I think the extension is like it's not going to hurt the Flames or it's not going to Huberto them or anything like that. Where you look back at this and you're like, this guy's making how much? Like a
Yeah.
it's not a bad decision, but I don't think it was necessarily the right one, if that makes sense.
You mentioned Mangiapane. That trade was inevitable. Like, we all knew that was going to happen. Not at that time, though. What, what were your thoughts on the return? And, like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I can't even remember, to be honest, when he was dealt, but I know it was around the draft, like maybe a day before, or a couple days before. And a little birdie had mentioned to the win column that he wasn't going to extend with the Flames, and we put an article out, but I had heard that he wasn't going to extend, but the Flames had obviously until March of 2025 to deal him. And I kind of figured that he would still be a Flame to start the year, and obviously it wasn't a great year for him last year, so the Flames maybe could try and get his value up a bit and then deal him at the deadline. But they made a great decision, in my opinion, getting his entire cap hit off the books and getting a second rounder back in a good draft. That's what the Flames need, is draft picks and young players. So it was a move that I knew he was going to be traded within the next 8 months, but I didn't really expect it to be so sudden.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really expected it to be kind of like a Nikita Zadorov deal where it's like, okay, you've had 2-3 months to get settled. You've done something. We're not going to wait until the deadline, but here you go. Like, whoever obviously makes the best offer and whatnot. But I think Craig Conroy did a really good job with that. And same thing with the Markstrom trade. Like, we knew that was going to have to happen. We knew at 3:00 the day of the trade deadline, when he wasn't traded, that he was going to be traded in the offseason. A lot of people were kind of, including myself, kind of out on Kevin Ball. Um, do you have any insight to, him and his game? Anything exciting to add?
Yeah, you might know him a bit better since you're out east and you've watched him before. I've seen him in the odd Devils game, and looking at the numbers, it's a fine risk to take, and it's obviously 24 years old, 6'6", defensive defenseman. You might as well
You're a Flame.
see what happens. He's been injured so far, so we haven't even seen him in even practice yet. So to me, I don't know if he's a guy that, this is just me speculating, like an American guy. I don't know if he'll want to stay in Calgary long term, or if this is just kind of let me kind of up my value and go somewhere else. But again, like a good bet for the Flames to take. They don't really have somebody like that on left defense, and they need premium left defense prospects, actually, when you look at their pipeline. So if he hits, that's a big plus for them. And I know some people kind of mentioned, like, you have 6'6" Zadorov going out and 6'6" Ball coming in. It's your Zadorov replacement. We'll see. But again, it's a young player who has some experience, and now he's going to get a bit, I'm assuming, more minutes and kind of show us what you are and go from there.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on him, as well as all the other players that have come in since the wonderful trade deadline that Craig Conroy, I would say, knocked out of the park for the most part. But coming up next, we're going to talk more about some player projections, expectations, and what do we do with Blake Coleman. But first, we're going to take a quick break here, and I want to talk to you about an app that I will use all hockey season long, and that would be Game Time. Game Time takes all of the guesswork out of buying tickets and even has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more money on sports, concerts, theater, you name it. You can use the all-in pricing option when you toggle that option on, and you can get a panoramic view from your seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And of course, it is football season, and you can win big with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Thanks, everyone, for making Locked On Flames part of your day. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday. We talked about Sharon Govich a little bit and how, this been more than likely a one-time thing. But Blake Coleman, he had an incredible year. Obviously, on the older side. But I feel like he's really settled in and found, I don't want to say his Tampa self again, because that was a great run for him. But this is reminiscent of old Blake Coleman.
Yeah, and just a perfect guy to have around in Calgary right now. You have number one, an American who chose to sign here, and just by all accounts, a great person. Obviously, welcomed their third child, so he's put down roots in Calgary, and I wouldn't expect him to put up another season like he did. Like Sharon Govich, he's probably another regression candidate as well as Nazem Kadri. But the thing about the Flames is when you don't have a lot of star talent, you are going to need to rely on XYZ, and somebody needs to score. So maybe Coleman will do it again. Who knows? But again, kind of something I don't think anybody expected him to put up the offensive totals he did last year. But when you get the Backlund bump and just have kind of that veteran energy, I guess, and kind of embrace your role of being, I guess, a mentor to hopefully a lot of young players in future seasons. Here's hoping he wants to stay. I know there's a lot of people that talk about him as a trade candidate, and it does make sense if he wants to go, obviously. But from a Flames perspective, I don't really see it. As I mentioned, an American who wants to stay here, and he's a veteran presence. He's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Gotta keep him around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's definitely a situation where it could be a win-win if you keep him or you trade him. Personally, I'm in the keep him. This year I think is crucial for all the expected young players to make an impact on this team. But he is, like you said, just the poster child of what the Flames need in terms of like you said, American. He chose to sign here, and he's said over the summer too, he was like, I'm not planning on going anywhere. So that's always reassuring. I take his word a little more seriously than a younger player like an Elias Lindholm or Zadorov. But I think I'm fine if they don't trade him, and I'd be sad if he left. But depending on the return, okay.
And that's like the great thing about him having term on his contract is with a lot of those core guys now, the Flames aren't in any hurry to move them. There's no deadline like there was with Noah Hanifin in particular. So either you can just kind of evaluate and see how it goes. And yeah, it's a great situation for Conroy to be in this year as opposed to last year, where he's got a couple UFAs, but I don't think they're core guys or
like high pressure sort of.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So it should be a less turbulent season for Conroy and for the Flames, so that's good.
Dustin Wolf is expected to be a member of the NHL club this season, full time. How do you see them divvying up the goaltending responsibility? Is it every other night? Dustin Wolf gets a majority of the starts, or he's backing up, assuming Vladar?
Yeah, honestly, I think the most interesting thing about the Flames is going to be the goaltending battle and how they use their goalies this year. Devin Cooley is somebody the Flames brought in and everyone kind of thought was the third stringer, but it sounds like the Flames really like him and really value him, and they believe that if they put him on waivers, somebody's going to claim him. So it'll be interesting to watch, and Dustin Wolf is the only goaltender there that could go directly to the AHL with no risk of being lost. So I don't think that's the direction they go, but if that might be the way they start, like your training camp roster, final roster, or whatever, that might be the way they do it. But you have Vladar, Wolf, Cooley. These three guys have never been NHL starters. I think like the highest games played in a season is like 26 from Dan Vladar or something like that. It'll be interesting to watch. I think all three guys are going to have a tough time playing behind the Flames this year, to put it bluntly. But I think the best thing about competition with three guys is you're going to have to play your butt off every night, or you're either seeing the bench or you're watching the game from the sky. So it's an interesting strategy they're going with, and I like it. Competition is always cool to see. So yeah, it'll be a great storyline throughout the year.
Definitely. And I feel like it's a healthy competition too. Like I know sometimes it can be like an ego thing or whatever the case may be, but like all three of these goaltenders, seemingly good guys. Devin Cooley, I would he's just so funny and relaxed, and I think obviously he has that competitive edge to him and wanting this NHL job, but like I don't think it would like be shocking if he did go to the AHL. Like I don't know. Yeah. There's so many different ways that this can play out, and that's what like been driving me crazy all summer because I just need the playbook. I need to know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and like you said, it seems likely that Cooley he would be the guy out, but the Flames really like him. They gave him a 2-year deal. We'll see. Obviously, Wolf is very much loved in the Calgary market, and I think everybody kind of expects him to take the reins, but when you don't have a guy like Jacob Markstrom who's projected to play 55 to 60 games, and you have three guys that are kind of unknowns, it'll be cool to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And coming up next, we are just going to wrap up the show with some more projections and some more predictions, and we will be right back after this. If you are hiring, you need Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way isn't to search for a candidate at all. You just match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about us or heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today and rolling into the regular season with us here on Locked On Flames. This year, I don't even want to say tumultuous because that feels so negative. But it's not going to be like seasons past.
Yeah.
To put it lightly.
Yeah. And I would say there's little to absolutely zero expectations for this team. And I'll give the Flames credit in seasons where that's been the case. They have performed better. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the case with the Flames this year. But from an outside perspective, trying to look at this team, looking at the betting markets, looking at projections, like no one has them anywhere close to being a playoff team. And I mean, from my personal view, same thing here. Mm-hmm. If you compare the Flames roster, I think they're maybe better than 3 or 4 teams. But again, they have, I'd say, 3 second lines. And it's a weird, like they don't have any star talent, but they actually have a decent amount of depth forward. They have a couple good defensemen and a bunch of unknowns. And then, as we mentioned, the goaltending is a massive question mark, just a massive question mark. So it'll be like, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, and I think of back to like the 2021-2022 season. There were very little expectations on that team just because of the season they had before. And just fired another coach. They brought in Daryl Sutter. And things started clicking. But the difference now is there's no star players. You don't have that high-end elite talent anywhere in your roster. I don't enjoy saying that. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because what is an NHL team without elite talent? Not a good one. But like people thought, including myself, I didn't think Huberdeau was going to come in and, be another 100-point player. But I didn't expect this. And I feel like if there was a little bit more from him, maybe there would be a little more confidence. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think anybody expected him to be a 50 to 55 point guy. And just funny enough, he's going to have a much better season this year because everybody, I think I'll say the majority of the fan base to be safe, but like I would say like 95% of the fan base is fine if they're the worst team in the league. So you just know that Huberdeau is going to be like point a game or something. And
Yeah.
that's the thing in bringing in a guy like Anthony Mantha. They clicked game 1 of preseason, which means absolutely nothing. Let's be clear. But it's something else to try out. And like Kevin Ball, like goaltending, I think the theme of the Flames season this year will be trying things out. You have zero expectations, just experiment with things, figure out what works with what, figure out if something doesn't work at all, and then, yeah, you have, again, no pressing matters really, a couple UFAs. You have a lot of time to tinker here and see how you can put the best Flames roster in 2027 when the new arena opens. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Do you think, especially with the pressure being off and limited UFAs, do you see Conroy making more trades in season?
I don't think so. I think it'll be more deadline, like guys like Andre Kuzmenko, Anthony Mantha, Tyson Barrie if they sign him, which it sounds like they will, which will be fun. And I guess you might see a trade early on here if Matthew Coronato continues to impress, because like we mentioned earlier, and like I had predicted in the summer or thought in the summer, the Flames have way too many wingers.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they would trade a guy like Andre Kuzmenko and free up a spot for Peltier or Coronado to battle for. They didn't really do that. And if you look at line rushes in training camp, which again, super early, but he's an odd man out. So the obvious fit to me is to trade Kuzmenko and to put Coronado with Kadri. They played a little bit together at the end of last season and they looked good. That makes sense to me, but again, I don't really expect them to trade a bunch of guys mid-season like they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Preface that assuming nobody asks out, and
Yeah.
everything, the vibes are good right now, but if they get off to a bad start like they did last year, you could have guys like Rasmus Andersson say, hey, send me somewhere else.
Yeah.
So don't predict them to make a lot of big trades, but you never know.
Definitely. And before we wrap up the show, where are they picking in this year's draft?
6th overall, because they've picked twice there recently with Monahan and Tkachuk. So I'm just going to go with 6th overall. Not bottom 5, but still a good pick.
Yeah. And I mean, both of those guys, I'd say turned out all right. So hopefully, they get lucky again and maybe pick even higher, because elite talent isn't sitting in the soggy middle. But that will do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On Flames. JJ, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, X, whatever they're calling Twitter now, at James Johnson YYC. You can also find my writing work and our team's writing work at thewincolumn.ca or wincolumncgy on X. And yeah, if you like 2025 draft content, we're already putting that out. If you want basic Flames lineup news or whatever else, we've got it all. So yeah, check it out.
Yes, the Win Column is the go-to place for your Calgary Flames news and the written medium of Flames news. But thank you so much, JJ, and everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. I'll see you on Friday's edition of the show, where we may have a clearer picture of what this Flames roster looks like.